So when seed starting season is coming upon us very quickly, we should be starting a round of seeds within the next week or so. And this is the #1 mistake people make when starting seeds, and it's easily avoidable. That's the key here. This is going to apply to all seasons. Everything you see here was started by seed for me. And even with this season and this time frame, when time is of the essence, battling our first frost coming along, all that stuff, it still matters for this garden. Just my garden, but your garden too. So welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead, everybody. I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. My name is Ben. I am in coastal North Carolina. It is early November and it is 82 degrees. I feel like it is never going to get cool here. I'm not complaining, I'm just saying. So it comes down to timing. Every single thing is about timing. I'm gonna paint a little picture for you. Just imagine that your garden is empty, you have nothing growing, it's cold, and then all of a sudden you start to get that inkling that the warm weather is on its way, and you get the itch to start growing, and you just go crazy and you want to start your seeds now, right now. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We all want to do that, but the absolute number one mistake people make is they start all their seedlings at once and you don't give it enough time. So what we're really talking about here is when to start our seeds. I can't give you on a video when to start your seeds because it's very specific to your area. With that in mind, you can, however, email me with the email below and I will make you a seed starting schedule for a small fee. And it is customized to your area. So let's just get that out of the way right now. As much as I would love to sit here and say, start now, this, that, and the other, it just doesn't work. But in that same breath, what we need to remember is, first and foremost, if I could give you any kind of tip, and I say this a lot, is you should never be starting your cabbages and tomatoes at the same time. Absolutely not. You should be separating these things. And when I say separating, it's not even by like a week, it's by months. I mean, I'm serious. By months, you need to be separating that. So since we're coming into our first frost and the winter setting on us, I really don't want to focus on fall necessarily. I want to focus on spring. And so what I'm going to do is I will tell you my rough seed starting schedule for this so you can kind of see the difference in times that we have for when we're planting things. I do have a greenhouse here, and I will add in the greenhouse. I typically would do it separate, but for this conversation, I know there's a lot of greenhouse curious people. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna use that too in this discussion, but most everything else is out here. I mean, you see how small a greenhouse is, so everything we start for this will be very small. But for out here in the rest of the garden, it's totally different ball game. And it changes. This right here will change all of our seed starting dates for this area, not the rest of our garden, but for this area by roughly a month to 6 weeks. For the sake of discussion, what the greenhouse does is it raises the temperature so you get a higher low temperature at night, meaning in this area we can plant a lot differently. Almost throughout the entire winter we can plant. We do take a small break, and we will be starting our seeds soon for the crop that we want to put in there, but because it's so small, we don't start all the seeds. So I do want you to kind of remember that as we go through this. The first seeds that I usually start, and truth be told, last year I started my broccoli very, very early. We did our broccoli, we started it in December, and it worked out absolutely perfect. And then we did our cabbages in January. Well, going back this year, I want to do them at the same time because I'm really trying to figure out my best growing season for my cabbages to get them in the ground and get them satisfied so we can really start to harvest them sooner. You can see we're still in this year, 2024, the year of 2024 of our Lord, and we will continue to be starting seeds at that time. But we're not done with those yet. We'll still do another round of those in January. So what we'll do is we'll get those out, we'll get them situated, and then we'll get them going. But see, that's all we're going to start. We're not going to go crazy because these are the hardiest of the hardy plants, and knowing our area and our growing times and stuff like that, that's what we want to do. Now, if you know your planting date for certain crops, all you got to really do is typically go, and I like to give a little bit of a grace, is 10 to 8 weeks before your planting date and you start your seeds inside. So you can see at this moment, we're only starting 2 crops. And if we were to completely replant this garden, which it will almost have the same crops, except for we won't add the Brussels sprouts in because they don't do well in the spring here. You know, you can see that we will be doing all of these crops again, but just at different time periods. So we're not even thinking at all about our tomatoes and peppers yet. We're not even considering those. We're just kind of testing the waters, getting a couple things in and getting them going. So right around December, we'll start that. Now in November, we'll start the broccoli for our greenhouse here, but that's, again, totally different. Again, a month ahead. So that's about where we are. I want to try and give it a good try and get them in. When I get those potatoes out, I want to put the broccoli in right behind it and see how that works. So if we start those 2 crops in the middle of December, then we'll let those go, and then we'll come over here, and then we come over to this bed, which is bok choy, and the bok choy will be the next crop that we'll probably start. And so that would be around January, which puts us at setting these out in February to even March. And we may even need to start these a little bit earlier. I really need to go back and look at my calendar and see how it's going to work out, but that would be the next crop we would do. But if you're not like me and you can't grow kale, collards, and mustards at the same time, you know, they won't make it through the whole winter. You can really start these just about at the same time as your broccoli and cabbage. So that's going to be like your first main wave of crops to start. These need a longer period inside, so that's what we do. So then we move on and we say, well, what's the next crops we want to grow? So the list can be very long, it can be as small as you want, but we want to do lettuce, we want to do rutabagas, and then we want to get spinach, not turnips. We don't want to grow any more turnips. No, rutabagas are way better than turnips, unless you eat the greens. Then we would want to do our potatoes, we would want to do more radishes and stuff like that. So each one of these is going to be a step down approach. Now some of these that I mentioned are also direct sowed crops, which is another totally different aspect. And I think what I want to do is I want to break that out into a separate video about what to look for your crops, you know, to trigger like, hey, it's time to direct sow. So let's just focus on the seed starting portion of this. And so we're already in the middle of January, and we're talking about doing, you know, the bok choys, probably Napa cabbages because they're a little bit more sensitive, or Chinese cabbages, however you want to phrase it. At the same time, what I may end up doing, since we love our rutabagas, is we may end up starting some more rutabagas, but they only need to have and be in your house for about 1 month. So you don't want to let them get too root bound, but we will start those and then get those out probably around the middle of February. So we're starting to get in that realm there. Now at the same time as we do that, we could do our spinaches, because our spinach will come out and we can put that out pretty early. We would like to get it in the ground. Maybe we can put it under a low tunnel. Probably will be in this bed, and we'll put it in a low tunnel probably around the middle of February as well. But at that time, now we're starting to really cook with some fire, and we're gonna get our lettuce in the ground. Our lettuce needs to be started probably somewhere around the second week of the middle of January to the 1st of February, somewhere in there. It just really depends how our temperatures are trending at that point. So we'll do that. Now those are crops too that we are talking about putting underneath a low tunnel at first if we have to. And truthfully, everything we're talking about can be put under a low tunnel especially stuff like the broccoli and cabbage because we put it out so early, but we can remove that low tunnel earlier. So we're starting to do that because what's happening in February is the sun's getting higher and higher and we're getting more and more light, and then so we're really going to push that growth. You can see in this time frame we have our entire spring garden started except for stuff we direct sow, and we haven't even discussed our tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, melons, squashes, all that stuff. We haven't even thought about those yet. So you can see that we've made a delineation of when we're going to start our cool season crops and then bleed over into our warm season crops. And even then we're still going to be sowing some of our cool season crops and stuff like that, but we're going to be moving gradually more and more over to our warm season crops. So right around the 1st of February, we start our peppers. And then 2 weeks later, we'll start our tomatoes, our first round of tomatoes. And then 3 weeks later, no, at the same time, we'll do our eggplants. And then 3 weeks after that, we'll do our squashes, and then 2 weeks after that we'll do our melons, and then 2 weeks after that we'll do our cucumbers, and we'll just kind of work our way down. But when we're doing our peppers and our tomatoes and our eggplants, we'll also be doing another round of lettuce if we need it. We'll be doing more bok choy if we need it. And so all those are quicker growing crops that can harvest sooner. And so we'll be adding all of that into our garden at the same time. But as soon as that's over, as far as indoor seed starting, we kind of stop for our cool season crops, and then we just really focus on that. And so this does a number of things, and this is really important. What it does is it's going to, first of all, you're going to have your spring garden, and then you're going to be getting everything out into making it a summer garden. And so you can be able to rotate more crops out of your garden and really have a true two-season garden. Because invariably, what happens when people make the mistake, they go out and they start all their seeds at once, and then they put their lettuce out, their lettuce bolts, they put their tomatoes out and it does fine, or vice versa. The lettuce does fine and the tomatoes get too cold because they get too big to put in the house. You're up potting, you got bigger, and next thing you know, you got 2-gallon pots in the house filled with tomatoes and stuff, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. And once you start to separate it and separate your plantings, you can really begin to fill out your garden the way that you want to have it filled out. But also, we're doubling the amount of food that we're bringing into our house because we have it separate and we have our beds filled to the max. Just a little update, I pulled this off earlier off of our Seminole pumpkins. Now we're up to about 70 pumpkins off this one plant. And because we're not getting a frost, we're probably going to get more. So we have got a lot of pumpkins, but I won't complain. It's a good year, what can I say? The other aspect of this is if you look at the garden, like this garden bed behind me, this garden behind me is absolutely packed. I don't think I could fit much more in here if I wanted to. And it's the same for your seed shelf. So if I went out there and I started everything you see here, the same amounts, plus what I want to put in this garden in the fall or in the summer, I would have an absolutely packed seed shelf and I wouldn't be able to function. So what happens is we have a 4-tiered shelf. The first tier will get filled up, the second tier will get filled up, but then the first tier starts filtering out. And so we're filtering all these things out and we're maximizing our space inside. Not to mention the containers we're starting in and stuff like that. But we're able to put a lot more on our shelf this way by doing a step down approach and taking it one step at a time, moving through each individual plant and each individual season. Then, you know, when you first see it, you're going to see all of my whole seed shelf will end up being nothing but cold crops, cool season crops. But then there'll be a couple cool season crops left, and there'll be my warm season crops. And then towards the end, it's just going to be all warm season. And that's something you know that you're following that right path as well. So we want to keep up with that. Now, I do want to say I'm going to start my seeds for my greenhouse, and I'm not even going to bring them inside at all because the weather is the way it is and what we're expecting. I mean, 10 days out, we're still looking to be in the middle to upper 50s at night with no real threat of frost. So I'm thinking I can get them germinated, get them going out here, and then get them in the greenhouse when it gets cold and let them continue growing on this small shelf. But I've talked about this shelf in many videos, and it's not very big, but on this shelf, we will produce hundreds of seedlings on this 2-foot shelf. And it's because we can cycle things out. So if you think about it, and let's say that we're gonna start, well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start broccoli in here, and I've got a couple onion seeds that I'm gonna start to put in here too. We're gonna start them in here, and then that'll probably take up to here. And then we'll put a tray of flowers in here for some cold stratification. And so that'll be here. And then these that are over here will be planted, so then we can open it up, and we, you know, there's all kinds of things we can do, and that's just on this small little shelf. So really, if you do it and you follow a schedule, you don't need a shelf going all the way across. You can minimize what you need and make it a lot more productive and a lot more efficient is the word I'm looking for. Efficiency is key in all of this, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. So when you go to make your schedules and you go to make your garden designs and you go to do all these things, think about the timings. Think about when things are going to work out for you and what these plants actually like. You should never, ever put cabbage and tomatoes in the garden on the same time. They should always be separate.